Hello everyone, welcome to part 3 of our video tutorial series. Last time we have worked on NestJs application, we have created a controller, a module, and we have integrated it into a Angular application. Today we will continue to work with NestJs and we will install a new package called typeOrm. This is a object relationship mapper. And we also need to install a database. In our case, I will use Postgres. I've already installed it on my machine. And let's switch over to it. This is the Postgres administration panel. Here you can see I have created a block app database and a block user that will use this database. All right, now we need to do some work with NestJs. We need to install this the typeOrm package for NestJs. Let's copy paste it, go to our terminal. Come on. For Postgres you need to provide the name. The name is a shortage PG. So if you do this now, the correct package will be installed. Good. The installation took some time and we have NestJs and typeOrm installed. Alright, let's see the documentation. Now the configuration is provided into the typeOrm module for root method. Let's just copy paste everything from here and go to our block module. Alright, now typeOrm has a missing import. Let's just import it as well. Good. Now we need to change the configuration. In our case, it's Postgres. Okay, you need to name it like that, Postgres. Host is localhost. Let's check what is the port. Let's just try it out. The username is, as I said, blog user. And the password is, password. Good. Database name is blog app. Now entities, what it is. This is a actually interesting one. It will look for entries for files with the suffix entity and of type TypeScript or JavaScript. Now what it means, whenever you create a new entity which will describe the data of your database, you need to provide the name entity. Then typeOrm will automatically know, and NestJs will automatically know that this file is an entity. Now let's go back to the documentation. We have provided this thing. Now let's scroll down and we need to define a new entity. Let's just see what we already have. In our block module, we have a model, the post model. This is actually a good example what an entity might look like. We want to create a new TypeScript file. Let's just call it post entity. And you see the naming, my naming is a little bit different. So I need to change inside the configuration this little part. So this will look for a file in a camel case that has entity on his ending, like the post entity. Now, a little look at the documentation shows us we need a decorator that will say that this class is of type entity. Well, it decorates this class actually. So we will create a new class, post entity. We will add the decorator entity. Oops. And now we can describe our entity or our model. It will have, if you take a look at the post model, it will contain almost the same fields, but as we will work with the database, the entity requires a ID, which will be of type string, perhaps, or number. Let's just make it number. We can also decorate this ID with this decorator, which says primary generated column. That means that our entity will be reflected to our database, and it will also create for us those missing columns. Whenever we decorate a property of the entity, typeOrm will create a column in our database. The primary generated column means that this column will be the first column, the primary column of our table, and the value will be auto-generated. So let's just copy paste it. Get now the import typeOrm. Is it correct? Yes, it's from typeOrm. Now we have title, which is of type string. We have subtitle, which is also of type string. We have a image URL, and we have the content itself. Good. Now this can be decorated with very easy. We can decorate the content with column, and here inside this decorator we can provide some options. As you can see here in the highlight, it says that the first property is a type, which describes the type of the column. For content we want text. For the title we can provide a length, that because the title cannot be really long, so we can provide a length of 500 characters. The same thing we can do for the subtitle. And the image URL, well, that's a good one to think about. URLs can be huge, so we will say it's also of type text. Now I think we already done with describing our entity. Let's just try and start the application and see what happens. Okay, nice. The application didn't crash. It means we don't have any errors for now, but we need to check if something has changed in our database. You can use Postgres admin or any other tool to connect to a database. I prefer to use IntelliJ, so let's configure it really quick. Let's go to, okay, here are our configs. Let's open up database, open PostgreSQL. Now let's provide the configurations here. The port is, well, actually we need this port instead of this one, but still let's try it out. 56072. The database name is blog app. The username is blog user. The password is really secure. All right, now let's hit this test connection button. And it looks like something is wrong. We don't get any response yet, and I think the port is incorrect. Let's just change the port for Postgres. Let's change it to the default one, and let's apply. We should get, yeah. As you can see, we got the blog app name. This is the name of the database. We have a schema here, a public one, and it's empty. This can be, well, because in the configuration here, I've provided the wrong port. Let's just use the default port for Postgres. And let's restart the application now. And yeah, finally it worked, and see the difference here. We didn't have anything else but the app module and typeOrm module dependencies initialized, but now we have post controller, we have mapped routes, and we see that the Nest application successfully started. Now let's check if the database has changed, because whenever typeOrm sees a new entity, it should provide a schema for the table. And I have refreshed the connection, and now I see there is one new table, and the table is post entity. And if we open it, we see our fields that we have described in our entity. It's ID, title, subtitle, image URL, and content. Now let's go back to our post entity. We see we have created a database with that. A table with that with the corresponding columns. Now we need to work somehow with that. To work with it, we need to, first of all, let's remove the post model. Delete it anyway. And we will have a issue here in our post service because we have used post model as the type, and we might have an issue in the post controller because we also used post model as a type. We will come back to it a little bit later, but firstly, let's just concentrate on a new method in the post service. Let's call it public create, and this method will try and create a new entry in our database. Now we can use a different approach for creating new entities, or new entries in our database. The approach is called repository approach. Now let's switch quickly to the Nest documentation. As you can see, we have created the entity, and now we can create a service that will use a repository to work with the database. We already have this service. Now the only thing that is changing is a constructor injection, and you see we will inject a repository object. Let's just create the constructor, and we will inject a repository. Let's just add the imports here, and alright, it doesn't want to import it because something went wrong. Let's just make it manually. And we don't have photo, we don't have this type, we have post entity. Let's also rename the class itself to just post. And let's provide post here from our models and post type here. And this folder is actually now a entities folder. It's not a post anymore. I mean, it's not a model anymore, it's a entity. Good. Now what we can do is that we can actually use it to work with our database. Let's say, let me quickly polish it. Well, it's okay. Let's say it's not a photo repository, it's a post repository. This post repository, save. Now the method save will create a new entry if there are no entries with such a object that you provide inside. And if there is a such object, it looks by the ID, then it will update this object. And the object is actually a new post model. We can just create a new object with those fields here. We say title, some test title, subtitle, test subtitle, image URL will be blank, and content, some content goes here. All right, this is a object that we provide to this repository, and as you can see, IntelliJ shows me that we should provide a entity, so meaning that we provide the object that we want to create inside the database. Now let me fix the lint errors quickly. Missing trailing comma. All right, good. So we provide to the save method this object. This object for now is hard coded, but we will receive this object from our client side in order to create a new entry. Now let's also change the FindAll method. It will return an array of post, and now we won't use the mocked post data. We want our repository to find all of them, so we say find. Now you see there is something red. This is because the repository returns a promise. We can actually fix it really quick with the help of RxJS from. This will convert the promise to a observable, because we have declared that we return the observable rather than promise. Now the post controller has an issue as well, and we need to change the type to post. And I think we already done with the service. Now let's create a method to test our creation method. Let's just make it a get, because I don't want to launch Postman for post requests for now. And let's call the name create. It will return nothing. It will just call the post service. As for now, we don't want to return anything. And it will create. Okay, let's maybe just say that okay, it worked. No, it wants this one. Good. Now we can actually start and test the API. Let's go to terminal. Let's restart the app. Let's go to our local host. Oh, by the way, we need oh, there is an error. Nice, we found a error. Can't resolve dependency. Oh yeah, of post service, of course, because our post service now asks for a repository. Now let's see what the Nest documentation is telling us about that. And inject repository for the repository. Okay, it needs a provider photo service. Good, we have this provider. Oh, I think we don't have this one. This is actually what requires the repository. Let's go to block module, and it imports for feature block. Oh, I'm sorry, post. This is the missing part. And I think we can put the configuration in our app module on the top level, because we might want to have some other modules that will use typeOrm. Let's copy the import as well. Good. Now let's try and restart the app. Still a error. Oh, right. We accidentally renamed the post class. Remember, we have this, this is our entity. We renamed the class to post, but IntelliJ also renamed the file name. And remember, in our configuration, we said that everything that has camel-cased entity after the name should be an entity. And that's why when we said that the feature for typeOrm is post, well, the entities for this feature is post, it cannot find the entity because the file has no entity prefixed. So let's just change that really quick. Entity. And you see it also it asks me if there are any usages and we should change the usages as well. Well, I say yes, but again it changed the class name. Let's just change the class. Do you also want to rename the file? No, I don't want to rename the file. I just want the, well, actually, you know what? Let's just keep it post entity, so we can also see that this is an entity when we work in the code somewhere. And now we can try and start the application. Now, finally, it did work. We can try and test the application. Let's just go to the browser. And by the way, remember we had a new action in our controller. We have a create action. Let's just call it. So the point here is that we have two get parameters, two get method, and it should call one of them. Let's just see what happens if we go to localhost. What was the port? The port it listens is written here, 3000. Localhost 3000 post. And it didn't found this route because we have not post, but posts. See? Oops. Okay, we received a empty array. This is because this method was called. But we want also to be possible to call this particular method. Now, if you take a look at this decorator, you see it also receives a optional parameter called path. This is the path that will be after the posts. So let's just make a create path. And let's restart our application. And go back to our browser. Now we can say posts create. And you see it returned our OK string that we have provided here. But the more interesting thing is that we got a error here. Query failed error. Null value in column subtitle while it's not null constraint. Oh yeah, I see. Subtitle, we have described our subtitle here, and it awaits that we will provide some value to the subtitle, but in our post service, our subtitle, oh, it's a wrong naming here. Let's just change the name. See, the error says that something went wrong. The subtitle came without a value. Now, if we try it now and go back, we see no errors anymore. But the most interesting part, let us connect to our database, and we see we've got a entry in our database. We can also check it if we go to the posts endpoint, and we get the entry back. Let's just create a couple of entries. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just refreshing the page. And if we go back to the list, we see we've got plenty of entries now in our database. Now, let's just quickly tweak these the endpoint, because we don't want it to be we don't want to be to use get parameter. Get method. We want to use a post here, and we also want to provide the model itself. So imagine we are making a request from our client, and we want to create a new post with specific data inside it. So this is what we need. We need the post. And if you take a look here, we can provide a path again. But as long as we are in a RESTful environment, let's say so, we can have in our controller a get method, a post method for creation, and some other methods. As long as they don't have the same type, we don't need actually to provide a path for it. So we also, if we go to the Nest documentation and take a look at controllers, we see this is the post decorator. We also can access some query parameters, but this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this one. We can provide a DTO, which is the object that we sent from our client. And the key to do this is this little decorator called body. Let's just use it. Let's provide here a body, and this will be a create post DTO. Create post DTO. Now we don't have it yet. That's why the type is highlighted red. Let's just create one. Let's just make a folder DTOs, and let's create a TypeScript create post DTO, which will be, we can actually make it as an interface, I think, or we can actually make a real class that will extend for now our post. Well, actually no, we will make it a class. And remember our entity, no, we don't need this, something stupid. Our entity, post entity, has all those fields. Now if we create a new post, we don't need a ID. We can provide a title, a subtitle, a image URL, and a content. Let's reflect this in our DTO. First we will have, I will just make a really simple DTO without encapsulation. So I will say we have a public title, which is of type string. We have a public subtitle, which is also of type string, public image URL, string, and public content, which is also string. And now we can use this and we can send it. We receive this from the client. Now we can send it to the post service create, and we also say that this create method receives the create post DTO. And instead of making this mocked object, we will provide the create post DTO. Very nice. And this is basically the modification. Oh yeah, we also can make a return of the call of the post repository save method, because it also returns, if you take a look, it returns a create post DTO and post entity, a promise. So whenever it successfully creates the entity, it will return the created entity. Good. I think we have done for this tutorial. Everything works as we expected. And for the next tutorial, we will integrate and apply some changes to our client application in order to reflect the new endpoints, and we will add an interface for creating new posts. Thank you for watching. It was Ruben from Codeforges.